Women Today.
Faster, good afternoon. It's Tuesday. It's just gone 6 minutes past 2. And this is Women Today on Manx Radio with me, Beth Espy.
And me, Christy DeHaven.
And on today's programme, Amazon.com has come under fire for selling what is being described as a pro-anorexia sweatshirt. Now, this hoodie bears the phrase anorexia like bulimia, except with self-control. We're asking just how potentially damaging these sorts of products are. Also today, we hear from a nurse from Nobles Hospital who's taking her skills to the remote villages of rural Uganda. Also, a photograph taken in an airport of a mum looking at her phone while her 2-month-old baby lies on the floor has gone viral. We posted this on the Manx Radio Facebook page. It was actually taken a year ago and it's just hit the news again today because the mother in this photograph has felt the need to speak out about what was actually going on in the picture. Provoked a great deal of strong reaction on Facebook. Just use the hashtag #MRWomenToday if you want to take a look at it and take part in the conversation. And also, Maurice Powell, presenter of A Little Light Music on Wednesday evenings, is with us. And Maurice, we're going to be talking a little bit later about an exciting concert happening in December.
Yes, one of the biggest concerts I think the Isle of Man Symphony Orchestra has ever been engaged in. So I shall be looking forward to telling you a little more about that.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here, Maurice. And as ever, if you'd like to get in touch with us this afternoon, very easy. You can text 166 177, email studio@manxradio.com, or as I say, go to Facebook or Twitter just using the hashtag #MRWomenToday. But first, Dr. Jeremy Paul is a hugely acclaimed wildlife artist, a very skilled photographer as well, and his latest exhibition has just opened at the Isle Gallery in St John's. There was a preview at the weekend, so a lucky few got the chance to take a first glimpse of wildlife and artist view, and we are delighted that the man behind the paintbrush is with us this afternoon. And I just wonder how you feel when a show opens like this. I mean, what's going through your mind?
It's quite a strange experience, even though I've been doing these things now for getting on for 30 years. It's quite nerve-wracking because you're putting yourself on the wall. And the way I work, it's a year's work that you're exhibiting, so it's quite nerve-wracking. My wife says I get a bit ratty beforehand, but I
can't possibly believe that.
Oh,
that. Absolutely not. No, so. Take us back then. When do you remember first picking up the paintbrush?
I was one of these kids at school who was quite good at art but never really took it seriously, and I wanted to be a marine biologist and Jacques Cousteau and swanning around in the Caribbean, so my sort of all schoolwork and university was all to do with marine science, but I used to do the occasional drawing, and then, as with most marine biologists, you end up being unemployed at some stage. And I'd been living and working on a remote little Scottish island off Skye, and there were only 6 of us on the island, and no TV, no shops, no roads, nothing. And I started painting the birds and wildlife from the island. And then I was unemployed after that, and I thought, well, the only other thing I'd quite like to do is to try my hand at wildlife art and take it seriously. And I saw some work at the same time by a Canadian artist called Robert Bateman, and that just completely changed my perception of wildlife art. And I sort of said to myself, I want to be able to do that, and I'm still trying. So,
you mentioned Robert Bateman. You actually got the chance to meet him, didn't you?
Yeah, really interesting. I saw that he had an exhibition in London. This was down in the mid-'80s, and I went down to London to see it, and we got there the day after it had opened, and he came walking out of the office and he sort of said hello, and I was sort of all, and anyway, he came up and spoke to me, and then he said, "Where have you come from?" And I said, "We've just come down from Scotland." And he said, "What, to see this?" And I said, "Yeah." And he sort of went away, and then he came back and he said, "I'm about to go up to stay in Scotland in the Highlands. Why don't you give me a call?" And so he invited us over, and I spent the weekend with him. Really encouraging. And then some years later I visited British Columbia and went to see him in his studio, and again he was just so helpful. So yeah.
You say that the wildlife artist community, how you're all sort of supportive of each other.
Mostly. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of us know each other, obviously, and but I went a few years ago. I went on a trip to Botswana, a camping safari, with 10 other artists, which was interesting. There was some huge egos, So, but mostly, yeah. It's funny when artists get together. You don't really talk about art. You talk about prices. You talk about galleries, and then you slag off other artists. But it's good fun. It's all in good fun.
When you started out and really started to focus on painting as a career, which I'm guessing is around that time where you had a career break, which looking back, I suppose, was actually a very fortuitous thing to happen. But you say you were determined to improve your painting. And I'm really interested about whether having an artistic talent is just something that's in you or whether it's something you can acquire.
No, I strongly believe it's not in you. It's something. I always liken it to learning to play a musical instrument. Anybody can learn to bash out a tune on a piano, but if you want to do it professionally, you have to practice and practice and practice. You have to want to do it, and I'm a strong believer in that's the same with art. The only bit that I don't have to think about is composition. That just comes. It's obvious where things should go in a piece of work. Where you leave space, where you put things.
But it's obvious to you because you have a talent.
That's the only bit. But the actual being able to paint is. I mean, if you saw some of my very early work, you wouldn't believe that I could, make a living as an artist. And it's just. The more you do, the better you get. When I got back into marine science, having had 2 years out. I used to paint for 3 hours every night because I wanted to do it. And it's the same now. If I've been away on a trip or not painted for a few weeks, the first day or so back in the studio are really hard, because you think, how do I do this? So it's practice.
It's interesting that you're a marine biologist, but you don't actually ever really paint marine biology, do you? Is that just because of the nature of it being a difficult thing to capture?
No, it's just never inspired me in the same way. The marine science is very much my interest in science, and I've never really wanted to paint marine subjects. Whereas, when I'm out and you see some birds or wildlife and things, I just want to sort of scream, oh, look at that, and do a painting of it. Whereas marine subjects, it's more, well, I wonder how that relates to that. It's the science side of it, so.
And we mentioned your fellow wildlife artist. You were very close friends with David Shepherd, weren't you? And are still very much involved in his foundation.
Yes, I mean, I first met David here on the Isle of Man probably about 25, 30 years ago. He came over and did one of his road shows. And I was just starting as an artist and showed him some of my work. And he was very encouraging, tried to get me to put more light into the pictures. And then I was involved in his foundation. He does a lot of conservation work, and the foundation specifically is work on the ground. So they will supply radios to the rangers and things like that, and simple things like boots and uniforms and things. So it's really practical stuff that they do. So I've been involved with the foundation for quite a few years now.
With the work that you see with regards to conservation through the foundation, do you get frustrated by other people not being perhaps as aware as they could be about their environment?
It's incredibly frustrating, but it's a very complex issue. I mean, you go to some places and you see the environmental degradation. I've just come back from Madagascar, and that's an ecological disaster, most of it, because they've cut down all the trees, there's soil erosion, they're just bare hillsides. And this is a place which has a unique fauna and flora, and it's just tragic. But then there is an incredible poverty in the country. It's one of the poorest countries in the world, and you can't blame a local family going to cut down a tree so he can cook for food. So it's a very complex issue. And I think one of the worst things is the palm oil industry, for example. I was in Borneo a few years ago, and you fly across the country and it's just mile after mile of palm oil plantation where it should be rainforest, but you try buying something without palm oil in it, it's very difficult. But it's not a simple thing, and wildlife in some of these areas has to sort of pay its way in some respects. I mean, I saw some very good examples in Madagascar where local communities are beginning to realise that by preserving their sort of local forest, they can get people like myself to come and visit and pay, to eat in the local restaurant. You pay the local guides, and that money goes back into the community, so they can see a reason for keeping the trees and the lemurs in this case. So.
Well, you mentioned Madagascar. You've also been to Costa Rica and also India in preparation for this latest exhibition. I understand you had a bit of a close encounter with a tiger.
Well, it depends what you mean by close encounter. I mean,
closer than I'd like, Jeremy. I think.
I'll tell you, I've been incredibly lucky. I've seen some amazing wildlife. But absolutely nothing compares to seeing a tiger come out of the forest sort of 20 yards away from you. It's a sort of a visceral response you have, and it's just, I don't have the words to describe it, but yeah, that's, mind you, I wouldn't want to be out of a vehicle, so because they're tigers, but most wildlife, if you're in a vehicle, it's the same in Africa, it just ignores you, because it doesn't equate the vehicle with something to eat, basically.
So how do you work then? Because I mentioned the photography. Do you just paint purely from the picture? What do you do?
It's the same with what I do here on the island. I go out and I take hundreds and hundreds of photographs. When I've been on a trip, I'll come back with a whole photo library of the place. So not just the wildlife, but the trees, bits of rock, the landscape, dead wood, the lot. And then I'll sort through all that and I'll put together what I consider is a good composition using probably 5 or 6 pictures that I've taken, and you'll take bits out of them. So the photographs are really just a tool to create the paintings. And when I set out as a wildlife artist, I decided I wouldn't paint anything until I've actually seen it in the wild, because for me the environment is as important as anybody can go to a zoo and photograph a tiger, but to see one in the forest in India, and you get all the light and the grasses and everything correct, then that's for me is what makes a painting.
So what can people expect from this exhibition?
There's a mixture. I mean, there's a couple of paintings of the tigers from India. There's a couple of paintings from Costa Rica. There's wolves from Yellowstone. Then there's quite a few Isle of Man based pictures. So it's a mixture of places I've been and things I've seen.
And when you bring all that material back to work from, what is your studio setup like at home? I'm intrigued because it's always a really fascinating space, isn't it? That private artist studio.
It's my space, my mess. It's I work in, it used to be my garage, and I just converted that into a studio. So it's a mess really. There's bits of stuff everywhere. Nowadays all the images are on laptops, but I've got a filing cabinet full of 35mm slides which I'll dip into and look at and things. So I could do with a bigger studio, but then that's the way it goes.
We've recently spoken with artists Svetlana Cameron and Bruno Kavlek about their work, and they listen to music when they paint. Do you ever listen to music?
It's strange. I probably work better to speech radio, so I mean I hate to say it in here, but
probably don't say it. Don't say it.
I listen to a certain radio number all day.
Radio 1 listens to Radio 1 all day.
Radio 4, I'm afraid. That's on pretty well all day. But then if there's something I don't, then yeah, I do listen to music. My children try to educate me with more up to date stuff, but I'm afraid I go back to the oldies.
I find it interesting that you listen to speech radio, because I would have thought that'd be quite distracting, because your paintings are so detailed. You'd think you'd have to be incredibly focused on them to get those marks in.
Yeah, no, I mean a lot of it, yes, there are times when you really do, but I seem to be able to sort of switch off and almost paint on automatic, because I've been doing it for so long. I know exactly the process to go through to produce the result that I want, and I can paint quite happily quite complex things while listening to the radio at the same time. So it's strange, really. Music can be sort of a distraction as well. In the speed of the music can change how you paint, no.
Do you prefer to be quite solitary when you're involved in a project, particularly with a deadline looming?
I'm pretty happy in my own company, and my wife says that I get really ratty if somebody comes into the studio.
That's the artistic temperament, is it?
Well, I don't know about that, but no, I'm quite happy on my own. Well, you have to be, because I paint for sort of 8 hours a day, and I could go for weeks without seeing anyone else but the family, sort of thing sometimes. So I just get on with it. That's the thing about being a professional artist. You have to you just have to do it and get on with it. You can't say, "Oh, I don't feel like it today." Although if the weather's really good or something, I'll go hill walking and pretend I'm working.
When you think of the incredible places that you've been all over the world, it does make me wonder. I think I know wwhy I would, but it makes me wonder why you'd want to come to the Isle of Man to live than any of these other places. What is it about the Isle of Man?
Well, I first came to the island as a student at the Marine Station in Port Erin, and then I came back in the late 80s, and with 2 small children, and it's just a fabulous place to live, and particularly for children to grow up, And from where I live in Colby, within 10 minutes I could be down at the chasms, watching the seabirds, or 10 minutes the other way I can be up on South Brule, and you've got hen harriers and peregrines, and it's just wonderful.
So it doesn't matter that we haven't got any tigers then?
No, there are lemurs at the wildlife park, but seeing them in the wild is something special. So.
Intrigued to know, Jeremy, if you've been to Uganda on your travels?
No, I haven't. It's one of the places I would like to go. The only sort of big animal that I've not seen in the wild is mountain gorillas. Ooh. And there are 2 places to see those. One's Uganda and the other's Rwanda. And I've looked at going there, but my daughter, bless her, vetoed it. She said, "You're not going there. It's too dangerous," because she had some friends who went to Rwanda and they were held up at gunpoint and things. So my daughter, she's watched me go off all over the world over the years, but she said, "No, you're not going there." So,
have you ever felt in danger, whether it's with the animals or with other human beings?
Put it this way, I'm happier when I get out in the bush rather than in the cities in places like Africa. And no, I've never really felt in danger, because I don't just go and wander off on my own. You go with people who are professional guides who know what they're doing. I know quite a bit about wildlife, but you wouldn't go wandering around a jungle in Costa Rica or in Africa on your own without somebody who knows what to do. So no, not really.
Dr. Jeremy Paul, I'd like to ask your views on social media shaming.
Well, I don't know. I just think that people spend far too much time commenting on other people's lives, and posting their own lives on social media as well. It's the things that I get coming up on my face. I do Facebook because I have to, as anyone sort of in sort of trying to run a business or whatever. But the things that come up, it's just ridiculous, yeah. And it's context as well.
Mm-hmm. It really is, and it's a conversation that we have time and time again because it keeps on happening. We have been joined in the studio this afternoon by the wildlife artist and photographer, Dr. Jeremy Paul, whose exhibition has just opened at the Art Gallery in St John's. It is on until November the 12th, so do go along and see that. But we wanted to know, one of our many questions, because there are many, many more, but we wanted to know, what is your favourite animal to paint?
I really don't have one. It all depends on what I've sort of seen last, I know 1 or 2 artists who paint nothing but big cats and things like that, and I would just get so bored with doing spots and stripes, So I get just as much pleasure doing, the sparrows in my back garden as going to do the more exotic things, So I really don't have a favourite.
How is it you manage to get the character into them? Because, you look at that, that's not just, I'm looking at some art in front of me, you've got one of your postcards here, that is not just a painting of a tiger. You can almost feel the tiger moving through the grass, and he has a definite mood in his eyes. How on earth do you do that?
Well, this is part of the job. In I say it's the reason I have to go to India to photograph them in the wild. It's knowing your subject and studying them and knowing how animals behave, knowing a bit about their biology, the ecology, and bringing it all together with the environment. It's knowing the subject and trying to get that into the paintings, which is I hope it does come across as not just a painting of a tiger, but it says something about the tiger as a big cat, as a predator, as sort of a wonderful animal. So.
You say, Jeremy, that your aim as an artist remains, as it always has been, not just to illustrate, but also to impart the atmosphere, the experience of seeing wildlife. And I just wonder about the feedback you get from people who see your paintings.
I get some really nice feedback from people, people who say that they just give a lot of pleasure and things out of seeing my work. I think also I try and to sort of do some sort of educating on wildlife. I get people who come into my exhibitions who say they've been saving up for 4 years to buy a painting of mine, and that's really quite humbling, So yeah, it's really nice when you get, because like I say, I work on my own most of the time, so it's nice to meet people who come and see my work, and so I spend quite a lot of time when I've got an exhibition on actually in the gallery and talking to people and things. So yeah, it's nice to meet people occasionally.
And when it comes to setting up the exhibition, how involved are you about what goes where? How I suppose how much of a control freak are you? Is what I'm asking.
Totally, yeah. Because then I can't blame anyone else if it doesn't look right. So yeah, I do all the placing of the pictures and help with the hanging and everything. Yeah.
And what's the next project?
Well, having just gone to Madagascar and I'm sorting through all the images, I'm in fact hoping to do a lemur painting before the end of this exhibition, so and perhaps sort of unveil it as such towards the end of the show. So I need to work on something from that. But I've got so much material. It's the time that's a problem. It's getting the things done.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon. Just remind listeners when and where this exhibition is happening.
It's at the Isle Gallery, Tynwell Mills, and it's on until the 12th of November.
Wonderful. Dr. Jeremy Paul, thank you very much indeed. And we will put the details of how you can go along to that exhibition on the Women's Day blog after the programme.